Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin and Karina, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com.
Take the lead. Sorry.
All right, and we are back. That was funny. Karina just made it really awkward, which normally I'm the one who makes it awkward when we start.
It's my turn.
It's your turn. And please, anybody but me, take the awkward lead. So today's podcast is actually going to be something that is really, really relevant. I either say like this is something that happens all the time, I'm so excited about this, like that's every podcast, but
I talk about things that are like relevant.
Talk about the real shit, man. Okay.
We're not just randomly pulling out topics out of our butts.
But seriously, this is actually really important and something that comes up so much with our clients, and it's just being afraid of the scale.
Yeah. And this is very normal too.
Yeah.
So
no, this is the number on the scale heavily affects people. Yeah. And we're going to go through like so many different reasons why. But ultimately, the whole point of this podcast is to understand that, yes, this is normal, and you might have conditioned yourself to be upset over a number, but there are so many other things that we can focus on, so many more important things that we
it's
can
not
focus
healthy,
on.
though.
No,
it's normal, as in like it's something that happens a lot. Yeah, but it's not something you should be okay with.
It's normal, but it shouldn't be normalized. Maybe we should say it that way.
That's perfect.
Wow, put that on a sticker.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does the scale represent? First of all, you wake up, you weigh yourself. What does this even represent? So obviously this is going to be your weight at a very specific time.
Right.
And we always ask people to weigh around the same time of day, which is when you wake up and you're fasted and you've gone to the bathroom. Like, you don't want to weigh with any other variables, right? The worst thing, I see this happen, it's so frustrating. People will get body fat tests done in like the afternoon, and I'm like, okay.
Oh, and you have a really good video on body fat testing.
Yeah, okay, we do. I was like, did I do a video on that?
It's very old.
Okay. Campbell, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
It was when you were living in your old apartment.
Oh, okay.
And you were at your kitchen table. I think that's the thumbnail, but I don't know.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what video that is, but I guess just go to my YouTube channel and check it out. But I think me and Campbell did one on just different types of body fat testing.
Yeah, I think you did a second one. But.
And so people will go, right, and they'll be like, oh, I'm getting my body fat at 3 p.m. First of all, most of the time that your weight is going to influence the percentage because it's all based on like regression equations.
Right.
So you need to go like at the same time, ideally fasted, no food, nothing has affected you. So the same thing with the scale, right? We're not going to do a whole body fat podcast. We could, but we won't right now. So for the scale, you want to wake up, you want to be no clothes, go to the bathroom, like ideally around the same time. If you weigh yourself one day at 9 a.m. versus 5 a.m., that's going to be
heavier at 5 a.m.
It's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, that's just going to be like, hey, here's this baseline. Like, we want it to be as consistent as possible. Yeah. And what is the scale number going to represent?
So, going back to what you said really quick, that is a representation of a very specific point in time. Like, that is not the number you are all the time. Understand that you can either, it's very likely that you weigh more by the end of the day. But what the scale represents, okay, so when we step on the scale, like, what does that number mean? Obviously, body fat, lean mass, but also whatever water you might be retaining. Sodium can affect that. Things such as stress and inflammation will also have a big impact on the number on the scale. Am I missing anything?
No, you did great.
Oh, and then also, very small details, but like how long ago you had like your last meal can affect that number the next day.
When you trained last night. So like, did you drink water before bed? Like, did you not? Like, did you digest things properly?
Right.
And honestly, there are certain people who, depending on their sleep, that really affects their...
sleep affects my weight like crazy. Like if I get like 3 hours less of sleep, I'm way heavier. But we wanted to list those as so people can understand like all of those things affect the number on the scale. And, to put so much emotional and mental weight on something that is so variable, it just doesn't make sense. Although I get it, because if you just don't know
Emotionally, it
those
makes sense.
things,
Logically, it doesn't.
if you don't know those things, then obviously you're like, oh my god, like why am I so heavy this day, blah blah blah.
But here's where the problem comes in, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Somebody will say to us, hey, I felt really good today, like I'm feeling really awesome in this program, like I feel like I'm making changes, but my weight didn't change, so I'm really upset. That happens all the time, and that is exactly
like,
what
I'm feeling leaner, but the number on the scale,
and that's what we want to get away with, or get away from.
Yeah.
So these numbers do change day to day. So what are some of the reasons like the scale might go up? We talked a little bit about it. You might have increased carbs, water, or sodium, or all three.
Yeah.
Especially if you've been, say like you have been dieting and now you're in a non-dieting situation. That's going to, if you're having more carbs, it's going to bring more water into the muscle. This is actually a really good thing as you're storing glycogen, but that is going to bring more water. So if you've been on a low carb diet and you add in carbs, bam, your weight is going to go up. It will settle. That's okay.
Yeah, and that is something that is not attributed to body fat. And I think most of the fear that comes with like, oh my god, I'm 2 pounds heavier today, like I'm 2 pounds fatter. Like, no. You could be 2 pounds heavier due to the things that you just listed as well.
Yeah, sodium is a big one, especially if people aren't used to it. And all of these things are when your body's not used to them. So I'm somebody who has a fairly high sodium diet, fairly high carb diet. I don't fluctuate as much from that anymore. Right. If I was in a dieted state and then I added those things in, that might be a little bit different. But because I'm not, that's a huge impact. Also, some people, I just have certain clients that literally fluctuate so much more than others.
Oh my god.
So much more. There's some people who, no matter what's going on, they're in like a 2 pound range, up or down, like kind of easy. Other people might fluctuate, 8 pounds in a week, like, and it's not that they're doing very vastly different things. Obviously, we coach mostly women, so there's going to be like time of month. Of course, it's like
I was about to say hormones, like what, if you're
cycle
where you
related.
Cycle.
That is what, and everybody responds differently to their cycle. So some people have, more water retention before or during, or everybody's going to be different there. So you have to know yourself, and then don't be upset. Like, somebody will send a check-in like, oh, I'm up or whatever this week, and it's like, oh, I'm on my period.
Well,
okay,
that's why.
That's most likely why.
Yeah.
Now, if you're somebody who never gains weight during their period and normally it's the week before, okay, that could be a different situation. But again, for most people, when there's hormonal fluctuations, that's going to be a contributing factor. Also, just decreased digestion.
Yeah.
And if you're not regularly using the restroom, that's going to be something that is going to play a factor, of course. Literally, if you have food fermenting in your stomach and your low intestine.
Yeah, I have clients who, like, some days they have, like, weird work schedules, and sometimes they can weigh in at 7, but sometimes they have to get up at, like, 4:30 for work, and I'm like, just don't weigh in that day. Like, it's going to be, you can't go, like, you're not going to be able to go to the bathroom, most likely. I don't want you, like, rushing yourself to poop so you can get on the scale and get ready to go to work. Like, that number that you see that morning isn't going to be valid because our variables are going to be different.
Yeah, and it's also just, people are going to be impacted, like we talked about at the beginning, like sleep is going to be a huge thing for certain people. And then also just like stress and inflammation. If somebody's incredibly stressed out, or they've just gotten back, like right now, we're recording this in July, a lot of people might not have had gym access for a while, and now they do, and they're back training and they're really excited. And, a lot of people's weight is going to go up for a few weeks because their body's still getting used to the training, and like that's all normal process when you're training. But if I have some clients, like every time they have a heavy leg day, oh, I'm up 2 pounds. You know what I mean? Like it, and so everybody like, oh, my legs feel like bricks. Well, you're probably going to be heavier.
After leg days, for me, after leg days, I was always heavier, and then anytime I go on like a really long run, my weight is always up, just because like that's a different stressor on my body, and the next day, like my body's a bit more inflamed and just trying to recover from that harder day that I had, and that's okay.
And so why might the scale drop, right? Like there's going to be obviously reasons why, hey, we do see the scale drop. So what is this all about?
So obviously, the ideal scenario would be like, hey, maybe we lost some body fat. And that's typically if we see a consistent drop. But sometimes the scale might fluctuate down and then go back up the next day. Maybe you were a little bit lower on water. Something changed with activity that day. Like you were just way more active than you typically were. So maybe you were in a deficit. But yeah, typically I feel like the factors for dropping don't vary as widely as for gaining. but obviously.
And the fluctuations are just a normal process.
Yeah.
And I try and explain that to people too. Like, hey, your weight fluctuating is going to be a normal part of this whole weigh-in process.
Yeah.
And we can get to this kind of at the end, more of like the coaching strategies, but there's going to be different ways that we implement weighing in, right? And there's going to be sometimes where people are weighing more frequently than others.
Yeah.
But I always say that even, like, there might be a time where we say, hey, don't weigh yourself at all. Like, we're not going to be doing this.
Yeah.
But if we are instructing clients to weigh in with us, we typically are going to want at least a few. Because if you only weigh in one day a week, oftentimes it's not the best reading. Now, I have some clients who, that's what they want to do. Hey, I weigh in every Saturday. Okay. That's what we're going to do. Understand that there could be fluctuations, and they understand that.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. But like, you could be having a normal fluctuation up or down, and if you only weigh once, it's really hard to make a decision.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to be more of like a lifestyle client. If somebody's competing, like, we need to get on the scale. Like,
Every day.
It's going to be most every day. We need to be seeing this, especially towards the end, when we're trying to make these changes and every few days matters.
Yeah.
So that's a really extreme example, of course. Or if somebody's making weight, like, for an event and they're a few weeks out and they're really trying to tweak things, like, you need to be weighing in a lot more.
Yeah.
So from more of like a sport perspective, it's a little bit different, but from like an everyday, healthy, potentially fat loss phase, like whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They're, ideally we're just getting a few a week unless we've deemed it's better to like just don't weigh in at all. So, I know we're saying a lot of like the negative things, but there are positive things about weighing yourself, right? Like there is good to the scale.
There's a reason why we have our clients weigh in.
Yeah. It's not like we don't want to burn the scales. Like we're not trying to say anything like that. Like
you shouldn't be scared of the scale. Like the scale can provide very valuable data feedback that you might need to know to understand like what to do with your food next, or maybe you're under eating, maybe you're overeating, or maybe this is your maintenance. Like understanding that variable feedback of the scale will be great for knowing how you need to feed yourself. And that is like the good of it, right? And that's where it's really valuable when you can just look at your weight as biofeedback data point. Like that's all it is. It doesn't mean that you're better or worse than you were 3-4 weeks ago. Just seeing it as a data point, I feel like, is the best way to look at the scale.
And realizing that, like, again, for our clients, we ask them a lot of questions, and it's not just hey, how much do you weigh? Like it's okay, weight, measurement, photos, all this qualitative stuff. Like it's a whole piece of the puzzle, and like that's why we ask so many things, because we can see, okay, depending on how much water you drank or how much sleep you had or how your digestion was this week, now we can kind of put some things together. Where are you at your cycle? Like, what is going on here? How was your training? Like all of these other questions, now we get to kind of see a full picture. Oh, this is what's impacting the scale. And I think that it's just so important to understand, like, this is just another variable that we're looking at, and not to get so hung up with it, but to also realize that, like, it's just like this weird thing, like, hey, it's not the end of the world, but like we also need it, right? Like, so we can actually see. And sometimes too, it's a good thing, like, so say you're in a position like myself who isn't really actively tracking, being mindful of things and that, and sometimes it's good to just check in with yourself, what I mean? Because it's not like, it's just keeping you accountable, like, hey, where am I at? If I'm trying to maintain around a certain amount, if you're just completely ignoring it too, like, that's not helping either. Like, just because you're like, oh, I'm not going to get on it. Like,
it's a good, like, point for a trajectory, like, say you are someone who is, are you still like dieting without tracking? Kind of. Right. So it's good to weigh in to see, like,
see what's going on.
Am I making the right decisions, or maybe I just need to have like a little bit less rice, like, so that's where it can be really helpful.
And also too, like, if my weight fluctuates a lot, just based on jiu-jitsu, because I'll sweat a lot, and like some days I'm there for several hours,
and you also get banged up, so you're probably inflamed. Every time I see Laurin, she has a new bruise.
RIP to my bruises. But it's important, because if I'm super low, then I might be dehydrated, right, which is going to influence the next day, and it could influence my training, and so all these things. So I need to kind of manage how much things are fluctuating. So you can use the scale for a lot of things, but there are good things. But one, is it harmful? Because clearly that's like the whole point of this, is like, why is it harmful?
Right.
And when it's creating anxiety for you to step on the scale, or that number is affecting you for the rest of the day, it has become a problem.
Right. And why I feel like that is an issue is because I feel like people will now place too much value on a number that is just supposed to be a data point, and now they're like almost identifying with it and allowing it to change how they feel about themselves, and kind of losing focus on like, okay, maybe the scale is up this week, but how do you look? Like some people will, so this really helped me for a while during our reverse, was I just stopped weighing in because that allowed me to detach from wanting to hold on to a number, which is very common coming out of a contest prep, like, oh, I'm not going to get above like 130.
Or when you kept saying that to me, I was like, okay.
I was like, okay. But,
all right.
Yeah. So I just stopped weighing in. I was like, I'm just going to like go by how I look. And if I had seen that number, like even now, I weigh in every once in a while, but even now I'm like, I really like the way I look. But if I was like constantly, looking at a number this whole time, I probably wouldn't have the same perspective about my body that I do. So
because we hold those thoughts in our head about like a certain weight, and this happens so much with competitors, particularly because we all kind of know how much we weigh on stage, right? And it is important. We can't say that it's not important. It is. You can't be like, hey, I like how I look at this weight. That's not going to cut it for a physique competition, right?
If you're trying to win, then we need to do what it takes.
The scale needs to drop, you know what I mean? And so it's going to be, there's going to be a weight range that you're going to kind of sit at for your competition weight. So what ends up happening is over the years, there's been certain coaches who say things, and there are some top coaches who say these things, and I want to rip my hair out every time I hear it. Oh, I only keep my clients 10 pounds above stage weight. Excuse me, what the fuck kind of advice is this? That is so harmful. You know how many clients that we've worked with who we have to work on that mindset so much? And these are tall girls. Like, they're not like, it's not, Olivia gaining 10 pounds, right? Like, we have a client who's like 4'11". And so her gaining 10 pounds is very different than me gaining 10 pounds. So why would you just blanket say that? And for people who are going, no, that's not what they mean. That is what they mean. Like, it literally is this idea of, we're going to say super close in this like 10 pounds. It's kind of like the, people always think about like competition reps are like 12 weeks out. It's like the same thing, like, oh, only 10 pounds over my stage weight. And I've had to work on so many clients. Like, they're 2 pounds that go like, oh, I hit that 12 pound mark. Like, my old coach only wanted me to hit. It's like, who fucking cares? You know what I mean? Like, now, are you gaining 40 pounds in a week? That's way different conversation. That is not the conversation we're having.
I think the thing to keep in mind there is like, you should gain however much weight you are, like back to being completely recovered and healthy from obviously all like the negative things or negative side effects that come from dieting, which are just normal, and sacrifice that you're willing to make, which is okay. You can undo those with a proper reverse diet. But to say that everyone should be 10 pounds above stage weight that doesn't make any sense.
That is so harmful. You know what I mean? And it's so frustrating that we have to even still talk about this. You know what I mean? But it is a thing. Or even people say, like, we're not talking about physique sports anymore, we're just talking about in general. Like, people will hold a certain number, like, oh, I felt better when I was 135, right? Whatever, that's arbitrary number. Like, oh, I feel my best when I'm 120. Like, that's when people compliment me. Like, that's when I look good in these clothes. That's when I can wear my size, whatever, right? And again, I understand that, right? Like, you have a certain body type that you are reflecting with, like, you're saying, okay.
You're associating happiness and confidence and self-esteem with you being leaner, having abs, being a smaller size.
But it's like, hey, what if you're 2 pounds over that and you've actually gained muscle and you look better, but now you weigh more than this arbitrary number that you had? And that's where it really becomes an issue. And I find this a lot with particularly women who haven't done a lot of strength training. So if you don't have a muscular base, right? Like, you've pretty much lived your life not really training hard, maybe hitting the gym off or on, not really developing a solid, just kind of muscular base. It's going to be, once you do start doing that, because these people always say like, oh, I want to look like this person. It's like, you need 15 more pounds of muscle.
You need to eat more.
Like, you need to eat more, you need more muscle.
Diet,
this is not a dieting issue. You know what I mean? Like, sure, you can get leaner, but then you're just going to look skinny, and that's not what that person looks like, right?
And unfortunately, that can take years, and that's not answer
and
people
that's
want.
really hard.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you really need to gain some muscle, and now your ideal body that you think that you want, like let's say again like that 135, maybe it really is 145, but like if you're always holding yourself back, like no, I need to do 135, you're never going to look any better or feel any better. So
and I feel like I made that mistake for like 4 years. Like
there was a lot of emotion tied to that number.
Yeah, but I feel like I could have been a lot further along right now to my ideal body type, or I mean goal, I guess. Obviously, just having more muscle. If I just didn't diet for so long, that's okay because I learned my lesson. I'm not gonna diet anytime soon.
Yep, I mean we all have to go through that.
Yeah.
I've been through my fair share of my dieting for most of my life, and it's pretty crazy like when you finally get over that hump, but then you like look back and you realize like, wow, I've literally been dieting for like most of my life.
Yeah.
Or some kind of restriction, what I mean? Whether it's a calorie deficit obviously it's not a calorie deficit the entire time, but it's like that podcast that we did a few weeks back, if you guys are wondering why you can't lose weight is the title. I don't know the number, but it was really, really good. We kind of dove into all of those aspects, and looking at your dieting age and your dieting history is really, really important. And you can't just like look up and go, oh, I've been dieting, my dieting age is like 20 years, and just think that you're gonna fix that in 6 months or 3 months or even a year. Like it's probably gonna be longer than that. And again, all of those micro diets that you've gone through, all those cycles, they compound. It's literally compounding interest, but for metabolic adaptations.
No, seriously.
It's not helpful. Unlike real compounding interest with like money, this is the opposite. And then if anybody could just see what Karina just
did my little money dance.
Yeah, we wish that was happening, but the opposite is happening in this situation. And then also you're tearing down muscle, and you're at a really bad disadvantage to actually build anything. So we've talked about all this, but like why do people become so attached to it? And we kind of touched on it a little bit, like if you're a physique athlete, you're going to be kind of rewarded for this, right? Because like the lower you are, the closer you're to your stage.
You trained your brain to be like, lower number, yes, dopamine, that's good.
And then, to be fair, you have to be at a certain weight to get on stage, you know what I mean? Or not a weight, but a certain body composition, which typically is reflected also by a certain weight.
Yeah, but it's important for you to like understand you need to make that shift now in order to look better the next time you get on stage. But I think you should expand on this, particularly because you made a really great post on it the other day on like why some people might be confused about why they think they're happier with lower weigh-ins.
Yeah. So I made the post. It was I used like a competition picture, right, when I'm like all tiny as hell.
Shredded.
And I was like, in quotes, like, I'll be happy when I have abs. And it's something that, I think a lot of people have said or have definitely heard other people say, but also most likely said themselves.
Oh, I totally.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Like, think about how many times you wear something and you're like, oh, I would just be happier
if I... It would look better if I was like 10 pounds smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, there might be some validity to that statement, right? Like, you like how you look in certain clothes when you're at a certain body comp. Like, that is obvious. And the whole point of that post was not to say, like, you can't have body comp goals, you can't have physique goals, like, you should work towards abs. Like, I think all those things are great. Yeah. But when abs becomes your identity and is no longer a goal, that is when you do get abs and you're not happier and you're not fulfilled. And you actually feel like a empty piece of shit, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Outside of course, like, the dieting extremes, which, getting to that point of, like, what I looked like in that picture and what pretty much anybody in that situation feels like, that is just not something that's sustainable, not something that's healthy. We talk about this all the time. Obviously, there's some people who just have abs, it's pretty easy. But let's say, for me, right, like, I'm somebody who just naturally holds weight kind of all over and holds weight a little bit more than maybe some other people who do this sport. If I were to always try and chase that, like, oh, I have to have abs, and try and hold that persona and that identity for myself, which I did for a very long time, then again, like, nothing is getting accomplished and you're losing yourself to that goal. And that's really where the issues come from. And it's really sad. And I think, like, again, a lot of people probably listening can relate to that, like, wrapping your identity into how you look. And people do this all the time. Like, they do it with, like, their degrees. Like, oh, once I have a PhD, I'll be happier. It's like, maybe not, like, maybe, but maybe not. Like, maybe now you just have a PhD and you feel better about it, but like, did you get that for the right reasons?
What is it called? Like the success crisis? Like once you get there, like you realize like,
next thing.
It's over, right? Like, so we find our joy in like the journey and like on the way there. And so I think people get confused, you know, like the satisfaction with hitting new lows or having abs with like you actually achieving something, and it's the achievement. So maybe you should just make sure that, you know, you're achieving something in a different direction that's healthy at that point in time for you.
And that was like to round out that post. It was like, I'm not happy here because I have abs. I'm happy like because I did something that I worked really hard towards, or like something that was competitive and something that really challenged me.
But not everyone recognized that. And so everyone, or some people are like, I was happy because I
had the abs.
No, you were happy because you worked your ass off and you accomplished something. You can do that in school, life. It doesn't always have to be about your physique, or you could just do that with like building muscle. And all those things.
And like I'd be happier if I was prettier, skinnier, this, like all these things, right? Like that is not helpful, and that's just creating this arbitrary identity around something that you may or may not have. It's not even that you don't have it, it's that like you're never going to perceive that anyway. Right? So it's this very interesting thing, and this can happen not only with like body parts, but it can also happen with the scale. And like, okay, I'm associating this lower number like with this achievement. And that is where like your brain just starts like wiring things that way, and that's how that pattern develops, and that those habits and mindset really develops, and that's when it kind of sinks in. And the longer you've done that, the harder it is to break. Again, it's the same thing as like changing your body comp. If you've been dieting for most of your life, don't think you're going to look better in a few months. Same way, if you've always tied your worth to the scale, you're not going to get over that very easily in a month to 6 year. Like, it's going to take a little bit more work. It's going to take some coaching. It's going to take some accountability. It's going to take some mental shifts to things outside of the scale.
Definitely.
And you know, so how do we detach from it?
And so this will vary person to person. I think that if you are a person in this scenario where weighing in on the scale gives you anxiety, or seeing a specific number kind of ruins your entire mood for the whole day, I think that you're someone who just needs to take a break from weighing in and focus on other things instead, like maybe just taking photos every week, or maybe taking measurements every week. But you know, that number is much more highly variable than the photos you might see in weekly check-ins, or the measurements you might take.
Those can be damaging too. So that also depends.
So if you're someone who in general like has anxiety around the scale, and you're someone who weighs in often, I think you should just take a break. If you're someone who, say you only weigh in a few times a week, and those few times a week make you nervous, then weighing in every day might help you, because it might just be like, this is the data point for today. It'll be like it'll be like brushing your teeth. Like, it's just something you do, but it's not something that really affects you. Like, it's just part of your day, and it doesn't bother you after that. And so I've seen it work both ways. I've had clients who, you know, in the past with other coaches, they've only weighed in once a week, and that day was like, oh my God, like let's see what let's see what it is today. And then, you know, I would be like, okay, let's get on the scale every day and see how you feel. And at first it would be like, this was a little weird because I'm not used to seeing a number every single day, but now I like understand that like this number changes all the time, and sometimes I can have like chocolate at night, and like the scale won't go up the next day. It's really good for those people, but just understanding your scenario and where you are will be really good to know. Like, maybe you need to weigh in less, or maybe you need to weigh in more. And
we talked about it on the last podcast, but like changing that plan too is really important. Like being comfortable saying, hey, I'm going to weigh in, you know, only twice a week. And then at some point you change that, and then you try out the more frequent weigh-ins. And then you might switch back, or you might say, you know, after my untracked dinner, I always am up in weight. So it's like, hey, maybe that day don't weigh in. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you wait another day? So there's going to be certain things that like are going to work for different people. And something that I've heard like so many times, and every time I hear it, I'm just kind of like, I just kind of cringe. And some coaches will joke, like, not in a mean way or like a negative way, but like, oh, you know, my client like can't get on the scale, so like her husband reads it, or like they look at it and like they won't even look at the number. And I'm like, and then that person emails me, and I'm like, that's like feeding into that negative pattern. You know what I mean? If you're so scared to face it that you have another person in your house write it down and send it to your coach.
Yeah. That tells
some
me
issues.
Yeah, that tells me that you your perspective of that number is wrong.
Wrong.
You need to look at that number differently because it does not determine who you are for that day.
No. And under really no circumstance would I recommend, and I've heard that many times.
Oh, me too.
Never recommend doing that, and that's not something to brush off. Like, and that now again, that's not something that's going to get cured in a week, but that is something that you need to actively work on with that client, because that is just a huge red flag to me. And like that is, there's so many other psychological things going on if that is what's going on.
And I've seen coaches just brush that off and like, oh yeah, like no, that's not okay. Like
that's not normal. Again, not.
And what other possible body image issues, eating disorders, things are?
There's no way that client is not having issues in other areas. You know what I mean? So, and again, it's going to take a long time to correct these patterns, but we can't just encourage it and be like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll just get your way into your husband or your wife. Like, no. We need to figure out.
You need to do some deep work on
what is going on there.
Yeah, mentality around that.
Yeah, so ultimately figure out what kind of works for your weigh and frequency. It's going to change. Expect that to change. If you are working with someone and you are, afraid of this, now I'm hitting shit. my top of the hands, I'm just kicking. I know, now you're kicking me. I just knocked the whole mic stand off.
Does it get little signs outside of the camera? Stop moving your hands.
It's the worst. I'm so bad about it. I've gotten way better though, talking on the mic, and not moving, but my hands.
On my hands.
Yeah, oh no. I wouldn't function. I would break down.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Just you'd be popping and locking your shoulders.
But yeah, so if you are finding yourself scared of the scale, if you're finding yourself anxious, you're finding your mood completely changed, these are not normal things.
Yeah.
This is not something that you should normalize. If this is how you've been feeling about it your entire life, you need to do work on this. And this is not to say, we are not saying you need to focus on a certain weight, but what we're saying is that you can't be scared of what that number says. Mm-hmm. And it can be really, really debilitating for people. And typically, it's not just going to be this one thing. It's going to be this plus a whole other host of issues that you're having with your body image, with your self-esteem, with your eating behaviors. Yeah. So that's why we want to focus on it, because it's not just oh yeah, everything else, you're doing everything else great, but this one thing, that rarely happens like that.
Yeah, and it's you're doing so well in every other area of, let's say, your plan, but the one number on the scale, ruins the momentum that you had before getting on the scale. That makes me so sad, because I'm just
it's sad.
It's literally, there's so many things that could be representative of that number, we covered in the beginning of the podcast. Just don't put so weight on that value, no pun intended.
Wow. That really closed that loop. That was a good one. So I'm pretty much a comedian.
Be here all week. That was my weird drum snare noise.
That was
It was a triangle.
Yeah, that was not a drum. I don't know what that's your punk ass stupid music you listen to. Fucking drums. It's a little baby triangle. Anyways, so thank you guys for
the cowbell.
We need more cowbell. God, fucking old Will Ferrell shit was the best. Honestly. Oh.
Sorry, I had to cough, and I didn't want to cough in the thing.
All right, we're really derailing. So, thank you guys for listening. I was gonna fuck shit up. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, you can send us a message on Instagram, or you can go to our website, teamlocofit.com. Go to the contact button, send us an email that way. We will definitely see it. Instead of sometimes the messages get lost. So emails are the best. We always answer all of them. And if you don't ever hear an email back from us, you probably put in your own email address.
Yeah.
So, because we get to all those. So it's so funny, when you see typos in the email, and then you're like, shit, what was this person's actual email address?
Oh yeah, and then it'll come back as not
found, and you're
well, I don't know how to look for you now.
Okay, put a thing on the yellow pages. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, and all the other stuff on the website too, articles, podcasts, programs, applying for coaching, all of that is on teamlocofit.com. So thank you guys. Ooh, and
oh god.
Okay.
What a rough outro.